Hey everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold. This is our weekly lecture series. Today's lecture is called Great Defense Against Strong Attacks by our sponsor, Keon. Thank you, Keon, for sponsoring the lecture. So we're going to look at three different games today, assuming we get to all three, where one side has an attack that looks scary, and the side that we're interested in, which in this instance, in this particular video, is black every game, is defending against the attack and coming up victorious. So basically, this lecture is on defense, which isn't taught enough by chess coaches and by chess books. Mainly, people are interested in moves that are double exclam and sacking all their pieces and mating their opponent and being brilliant, but they're not as interested in defending well, which is a very important part of chess, which is overlooked by a lot of people. A lot of people are saying it's overlooked. Okay, so the first game and the second game, but the first game is from the Candidates Tournament in Zurich, 1953. I used to have this book, I'm sure I still do, on the tournament that was written by David Bronstein or Bronstein, and translated by Michigan master Jim Marfia. Go Jim. I've played Jim Marfia more than once. And translated from the Russian into the English edition, if you have the book. And I remember a couple of games where white had big attacks, and these are the best players in the world, and black was able to defend. First one is by Max Euwe, which is very funny because my last lecture was on Max Euwe. But we didn't show this game. This is against Efim Geller. Efim Geller, well, I would say in 53 probably wasn't at the height of his powers. I think Geller was more of a 60s guy. So Euwe was a better player in 53 than Geller, and you can see from this game. But Geller was a fierce attacking player, so you got to watch out when you're playing Geller. Geller, for example, had a plus score against Bobby Fischer, so pretty good attacking player. And Geller was better than Fischer in 53, because in 53 Fischer turned 10 years old. So although nowadays it doesn't really mean much. Okay, so they played a Nimzo Indian, also known as the Nimzo Indian, if you make it one word. This opening popular throughout chess history since the 1920s, I would say. One of the most popular openings, and in fact, I have a chessable course on playing black in the Nimzo Indian. So I wonder if this game is in there. There's only one way to find out. Purchase your course today. Okay, so black is pinning the knight on c3. And white is PO'd because c3 is pinned. And as a consequence, he's going to play r2 to d2. Man, I make that joke so many times, I don't even understand it anymore. Okay, so anyway, may the fourth be with you. Okay, e3, that's the old move. And they still play e3, called Rubinstein variation. c5, then a3, transposing into the same-ish variation. White gives a tempo away, but wants those two bishops, vatals. So black gives away the two bishops. As a consequence, white's pawn structure and development, well, they're non-existent. The pawn structure exists, but barely. Okay, b6, which in my chessable course on the Nimzo Indian, I recommend in 95% of the variations that black plays b6, and then either bishop b7 or bishop a6, depending on the circumstance. And that makes sense because black's, let's see, how do I do this? Black's pawns are blocking the bishop that way, so putting the bishop on one of these diagonals makes perfect sense. Okay, bishop d3, bishop b7, threatening to win the game immediately. f3, always play f3. What's that? Don't always play f3? What, I'm talking to myself? Well, okay. I mean, if nobody's going to talk to you, then talk to yourself. I learned that from Robert De Niro. Complicated joke. For more information on that joke, see the movie Taxi Driver. Okay, so black plays knight c6, developing a piece. So white has a worse pawn structure. White has the two bishops. Black has a lead in development, but white's doubled pawns give way to later him playing the move e4 and getting a big center. And in these positions, sometimes black tries to attack this pawn with knight a5 and rook c8 and bishop a6 and knight e8 to d6. And we put tremendous pressure on the c4 pawn. And sometimes white sacrifices the pawn and plays for checkmate, which makes sense because this particular lecture is how to defend against strong attacks. So, okay, and with that many arrows, black has to be doing okay. Okay, knight e2, developing the knight, castles, and black plays knight a5. Black's going after the c4 pawn, as we talked about earlier. E4, white gets a big center. And here, Euwe played knight e8. It's actually typical in the Nimzo-Indian for black to play knight e8 before white plays e5. Black can play f6 or f5. Black can play knight d6. And it's not clear if white should play e5 or just leave the pawn on e4. Although white pawn stays on e4 too long, then the bishop's sort of blocked. So you usually want to play e5 so your bishop has, some scope, or Listerine or Lavoris or something. Some kind of joke that I can't understand. Okay, white played knight g3, getting the knight over to the black king. Black took on d4, opening up the c file for the black rook. See, I told you. And this pawn isn't long for this world. Not only am I threatening it now, but I can play bishop a6 or knight d6. So white's going to sack a pawn. White's going to have the big center. White's going to have his two bishops. White's going to have an initiative. And black's like, I'm up a pawn. What's the problem? Now, one thing that I talk about with my students that I don't talk about enough, like in my regular lectures, is the fact that when you haven't moved pawns in front of your king, that's good. And to prove my point, white has moved the f pawn, which is on the diagonal, to his king. And later in the game, you're going to notice that white's king is unsafe because the white pawn's on f3. So when you haven't moved the pawns in front of your king, then you typically don't want to, because that makes it harder for your opponent to attack you. And I can make this make sense like in a war scenario. Like chess is like a war. It's like your army versus the other person's army, if you can call the other person a person. And the most important person in the army is the king. If your king gets checkmated, you lose the game. So it's sort of important. And so you want as many men or women around your king as possible, and you want them in close proximity. Okay, so enough of my borax Poindexter. We need action. f4. White's going to lose the c pawn anyway, so white goes for the attack. Knight takes c4. Euwe has won a pawn, and Geller plays f5. Geller starting the kingside attack. And the question is, how should black defend, since that's the title of the lecture? The actual title is Great Defense Against Strong Attacks. Okay, so white has a strong attack. White's got, knight on g3 in the vicinity of the black king, bishop on d3, rook on f1. This queen can come into g4 or h5. Bishop on c1 is coming towards the... So you can see there's a lot of potential for white to have a big attack against the black king. Okay, Euwe played f6, and this was 1953, so we didn't know about never play f6, which basically stops white from ever playing f6. If it was white's turn to move, probably white would play e5 and then f6, opening up the diagonal for the bishop. Then the queen is coming. Then we're going to have to change the title of the lecture because then white's going to probably win. So, okay, so f6, blocking the white attack. Rook f4, white does a rook lift to, attack the black king. b5, this lets the queen go to b6 or a5 and defends the knight again. Not worried about white's attack yet. Rook h4. Here comes white's attack. Queen b6. So if it was black's turn to move, black would play queen takes d4 check, and the rook on a1 isn't defended. On the other hand, well, I don't see a good way to defend d4. Bishop e3 hangs the bishop. Bishop b2 hangs the bishop. Knight e2, man. White didn't play knight g3 and then want to play queen h5 to play the move knight e2, blocking the queen. So it doesn't want to play knight e2. There's not a lot more ways to defend the pawn. I guess you could play e5 and the rook defends the pawn, but then nothing's defending e5 because this is pinned. So for example, e5, knight takes e5. Then no matter how many times I try to take the knight, the computer won't let me because it's illegal. Okay, now you could say, well, white just sacrifices the d pawn. White's playing for mate. Queen h5 and queen h7 and all that jazz. Well, the problem is this not only wins a pawn, it also wins a rook. And if your queen starts coming out here, then I could also win the bishop. So I don't know what white should do. Queen b6 is good counterplay for black, putting pressure on the center. Let's see what Geller did. He played e5, defending his pawn like I said he could. Knight takes e5. Okay, this is the line that I suggested. Now he played f takes e6, and he's threatening the pawn on h7. Now, this game teaches us something which you knowing it might not help you, or it might help you. And that's the problem with chess, is you see something happen in a chess game and you think that applies to all chess games and all positions. And in this particular chess game, and in some others, when somebody takes on h7 with a queen or a bishop, sometimes it's mate. And sometimes it's not mate, and the king just walks away. And so, if you're the kind of person who says it's always mate, so I can never let them take on h7, then you're going to miss opportunities where you can. And if you're the kind of guy who says, I don't care if they take on h7, my king just walks away. Sometimes your king can't walk away, and you just get mated. So, like a lot of things in chess, you can't just think one thing and that applies to all positions. Okay, in this particular game, Euwe's world champion, so he's not going to think one thing and then think that applies to all positions. He's going to be flexible in his thinking and see if things apply to this position. Now, if it was white's move here, white just checkmates. So we're going to do a Yasser Seirawan, because Yasser's better than me. We're going to play a silly move, a6. Then we're going to see what white's threat was, because now I can make moves for white. Bishop takes h7 check. King has to go here. Bishop g6 check. King has to go here. Rook h8 check. And By the way, white has many ways to win. I'm just showing the quickest. Queen h5 check and checkmate. Or if you're mean like me, you check on h7 with the bishop and then repeat and then mate. But I'm just kidding. Okay, so the point of that nonsense was to show you the threats that white has in the position. Now, on the other hand, if somehow bishop takes h7 check was illegal, probably taking on d7 or e7 is good for white, or queen h5. Okay, so Euwe plays knight takes d3, getting rid of one of the attacking pieces. And the point of this lecture is to teach you how to defend properly. Getting rid of your opponent's attacking pieces, that's one way to do it. Queen takes, threatening, queen takes h7 checkmate with advantage. And Euwe just calmly takes the pawn on e6 and says, you can play queen h7 because you're all talking a badge. You got nothing. You got nothing. Okay, and that's from the Untouchables, which I think was from the 80s. Was that the 80s or the 90s? It was the 80s. Maybe 87. Robert De Niro plays Al Capone. Kevin Costner plays, the cop guy, the treasury guy. Elliot Ness, that's his name. Okay, so a lot of you, I mean, like most of you probably, would be very uncomfortable letting your opponent play queen takes h7 check. And you're like, why are you showing me this game? White's attack pulled through. Well, not really. White checked black, and black is still a pawn up. And because of the knight on e8 defending the g7 pawn, and because the big pieces are on white squares, and white has a dark squared bishop, there's not much more attack. Although it looks good for white, looks like white's attacking, but I can't give you a specific threat. Whereas I can give you specific threats for black. Queen e1 check, knight f1, rook takes c1. That wins a piece. So, and let's say white goes, roar, I will not go gentle into that good knight, and puts the good knight on h5 or f5, then queen e1 is mate. God damn. Okay, so that's funny that white can play an attacking move like knight f5 or knight h5, and it's mate for black. Okay, so Geller played bishop h6. That defends the back rank and puts pressure on g7, although g7 is sufficiently defended. Rook h8, double exclam, former muscle. That's one of the most amazing moves in this tournament, and this tournament had a lot of amazing moves. Black sacrifices a rook to get white's queen off of the defense of this diagonal. So the queen takes the rook and says thank you. And now black starts attacking with rook c2. If black had played rook c2 on the previous move, then the queen would have captured. Now we're threatening rook takes g2 check, which would lead to checkmate. We'll do another Yasser, a4, terrible. Rook takes g2, queen c4 check. God damn. King e1, queen c3 check, etc. Mainly etc. For example, if you don't like that mate, then maybe you'll like this kind of checkmate. Now after here, we have checkmate, and if I'm not mistaken, this is also checkmate. Okay, so I made a silly move for white because I was showing you black's threat. Rook takes g2 check. So in this game, black got a counterattack against White's king, because White wasn't worried about his king. White was worried about Black's king, and White moved all of his pieces towards Black's king. Then White's king got open. Man, no wonder that guy was world champion. He's pretty good. You know, he's basically been insulted his whole life and death of being the weakest world champion. But I mean, like, that's like being the stupidest guy at MIT. You're still smarter than, you know, like Harvard or something. Man, that was a complicated joke, making fun of Harvard. Also, I was driving by in Connecticut, and I thought I saw Yale, but it was just a barn. Although the guy who told me it was a barn was a guy from Harvard. Okay, and that's like a Family Guy joke that you guys don't get. Okay, anyway, if you've seen every episode of Family Guy and remember them, then that's like 2 or 3 jokes right there. Okay, so Geller played Rook C1, and the point of Rook C1 is after takes, there is no Queen C4 check, which I showed you previously, because you can take it. Okay, so Euwe played Queen B3, threatening Queen F3 check and or Queen D3 check. And you can stop one, you can stop the other one, but you can't stop them both. Again, Black's down a rook, but the king is what's important. And strangely, Black's king is better defended than White's, and Black's attack against White's king is better than White's attack against Black's king. King E1, Queen F3, and now we're threatening, so I'll make a silly move, A4. Queen F2 check, Bishop F3 check, and checkmate. And I made a silly move for White, but in this position, White resigned. So the move that sticks out to me as being a move that makes sense is Rook F4, because that stops Queen F2 check. Unfortunately for White, I can check, then this is checkmate. This is checkmate. And this is checkmate. So Rook F4 don't work. I don't know what does work because Geller resigned. So I'm guessing nothing works. So if you find a defense for White, like you're using your engine, you know, I don't think there's a defense because I think I would have known about it for White resigning when he shouldn't. But Black's king was under tremendous attack. He allowed queen takes h7 check. Then he sacrificed his rook on h8 so he could get a big counterattack. An amazing win. And in my opinion, that's the third most exciting game from Zurich. The second most exciting game we're going to look at now, the most exciting game, if I remember correctly, and you guys in the comments chat can, you know, and YouTube can, you know, tell me how I'm wrong, is the game Averbach-Kotov, where Kotov sacks his queen and Averbach's king walks up the board. Unless it was Kotov-Averbach, and Averbach's the one who sacked his queen. But I seem to recollect it was Kotov. Although I'm piecing this together from cereal boxes. So, okay. So that was the first game in our defense becomes offense. This game was also played in Zurich at 53 in the same tournament between Paul Keres and Vassily Smyslov. And one thing I like to do, because I like teasing people, must be some kind of emotional trauma I had as a child. They're like, Zurich 53, I own that book, I like that book, I like that tournament, etc., etc., etc. And then I ask those same people, and I can ask you now, and then you can go hamana, 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 hamana. Who won the tournament? And they're like, who won the tournament? Okay, they always make the exact same noises. So if I remember correctly, and if I recall correctly, Vassily Smyslov won the tournament, and a few years later became world champion. Go Smyslov. And this is a Smyslov game. He's black against Paul Keres. Obviously, Keres, one of the top 10 players in the world, if not one of the top 5. Okay, and they played this kind of symmetrical queen pawn, b6, b3 kind of, stuff. This was pretty popular 100 years ago, these kind of opening positions. Now, most people feel white doesn't get an initiative, so people try to play other stuff with white now. This isn't as popular. Probably in like Blitz and Bullet, people still play this way with white. But in slow chess, you'll be hard-pressed to find like a super grandmaster game in this kind of opening. Okay, rook c1, rook c8. So just equal position. Nobody has an advantage here. Rook e1. Knight b4. Black wants the 2 bishops. I can't imagine white letting black get the 2 bishops. So always play bishop f1. Even in 1953, they knew this. Now, typically, I would want to play bishop b1 because I want to put my queen here and play queen h7 mate. But my c pawn's hanging. It's not defended. So therefore, always play bishop f1. Now the c pawn's defended. Okay, he plays knight e4. Now, if it was black's turn to move, which it's not, black would play knight takes knight, and then knight takes a2, winning a pawn. So white played a3, stopping that. Knight takes. Takes with the rook. If he takes with the bishop, once again, black gets the 2 bishops. And not only that, black gets the fatals. Because after rook c2, your a pawn is not defended. So black has 2 bishops, an extra pawn, control of the dark squares, and black is threatening bishop b4, winning more material. So needless to say, Keres didn't play bishop takes c3, took with the rook. Okay, the knight's attacked, he moved back. Knight e5. And white's rook is on c3, which may look strange to you, but he's going to do a rook lift. Well, he did the lift part. Now he's going to do the over. Jennifer Shahade, your favorite women's grandmaster and poker player, she calls that a rover, which is a term she made up, because the rook goes up and over. So it's a rover. Everybody else calls it a rook lift, but what she said makes sense. So can't argue with Jen. Okay, knight takes, rook takes. White's got 2 rooks, 1 for each of you. Bishop f6, rook h5, g6, rook h3. So white's idea is if you take, I take with the queen, and white has some attack, and then some. If you play rook e8, I think I can play queen h6. Then if you play bishop g7, I can play rook g3. This looks pretty good for white. Okay, so he doesn't take the rook. He takes on c4, getting counterplay in the center. Rook takes h7. And now, let's see, the title is Great Defense Against Strong Attack. Obviously, white has a strong attack with the rooks on the h-file right next to the black king. But specifically, I can't explain to you what white's threat is. I can't say, oh, white's going to go here and here. I don't know what white's going to do. White's rooks look pretty strong next to the black king, but bishop on f6 is a monster. And the funny thing is, white hasn't sacrificed any material. White gave up the d pawn, the c pawn, I should say, and won the h pawn. So material's equal. Okay, let's see what Smyslov did. Played c3, and now white was PO'd because of all those jokes I make. Now, white would like to capture the pawn, but the rook on h3 is overworked. It's defending the rook on h7. So if rook takes c3, you're giving up your rook. If bishop takes c3, I just sack the exchange, because even in 53, they always sack the exchange. But I'm not really sacking the exchange, because I'm winning your rook on h7. Okay, so what did Keres do after c3? Played queen c1. He said, you can take my bishop, and I'm going to play queen h6. God damn. All right, then man, defending against the attack. That's a tough attack. Truth hurts. Okay, black played queen d4, double exclam, former muscle, defending on the diagonal. White played queen h6. Now, pause the video if you need to. If you don't need to, then don't. And tell me what white's threatening. The answer is actually funny. White's threatening to sacrifice the rook on either square, and then queen h7 mate. So for example, I take, check, mate. Or I can check here and then mate. However, there is no threat on h8. It's not like, oh no, rook h8, queen h8. Whoops. Typo. That doesn't matter, because the queen can just take. And white's pieces are all gone. Good defense. So the queen and the bishop make a good defense for the h8 square, but they don't defend the h7 square. So we have to stop queen h7 mate after the rook sack. So black plays rook f to d8, giving his king the f8 square. Now in either instance, rook h8, queen h7, I have king f8. Or if you play rook g7, I still have king f8. That's the point of rook f d8. So white's attack looks strong, but now what? Man, I can only imagine, like, when you're at home and you're playing Rufus and Doofus on the internet, you're like, Rufus and Doofus can't checkmate me. But if you're playing in a candidates tournament and your opponent's Paul Keres and he has tripled on the H-file like the famous wrestler, is he a wrestler? I don't know. Triple H. Although I could have made that up. I can't get my own jokes. You could see how you could be scared. You could be frightened if you were black. Okay, white played bishop c1 because the bishop was attacked. Bishop g7, kicking the queen out. Queen g5. Queen f6. Let's go into an endgame. In the endgame, white doesn't really have any attack. So Keres moved his queen back. c2. And black just says, you don't have an attack. I got no problem. Bishop e2, defending d1. Black wants to play rook to d1. So bishop e2, trying to prevent that. Rook d4, attacking the queen. f4. The queen has to stay on d1. If my queen moves here, for example, then this is going to end very poorly for white. Rook d1 check. And white's like, what are you doing? I have all my guys on d1. And then Smyslov throws in another check. And the game's over. Now, black's going to take on d1 and make a queen. Or you could take with the queen also winning. So, brilliant defense by Smyslov. Nice try from Keres. That's actually my second favorite game from the Zurich tournament. White's tripling on the H-file, but black just defends coolly with bishop f6 and queen d4. That was a nice defense. And white's attack was insufficient, and here white resigned. Okay, last but not least, I wanted to show one of my games because I'm getting attacked a lot. That's, usually it's on the internet. Somebody's like, you can't say that about Box, and don't you realize that, these streamers are very important? So usually I'm the one getting attacked. So I figure I could show one of my great defenses. Okay, so there's a story behind this game. There was live analysis somewhere on the internet by International Master Danny Kopech, RIP. This game was played in 2006 at the U.S. Championship in San Diego. So he's passed since, but this was played 19 years ago when he was alive. And a friend of mine said, Kopech said, Finegold's going to get mated. This is terrible what he's doing. So the onlookers, the kibitzers, the annotators, they thought I was going to get checkmated, but I defended well, and I ended up winning the game. So I played my favorite line in the Sicilian, which is terrible. A lot of my favorite lines are terrible. It's the Rouser Sicilian, and I play this line with black. Okay, and many grandmasters have had black in this position, and I play a certain way here, which the engine says is terrible, but I have good results in slow chess. In fact, in slow chess, I don't think I've lost. I have lost in blitz chess. And if you watch me stream, you've seen me have this position before because I have it like once a month. Okay, so I play knight d7. That's not a good move. And probably in this position, my friend Stuart Rachels, he thinks bishop b4 is the best move. I probably should study this position, this one, and play better. Because the last tournament game I had a couple of months ago, I didn't do well. I drew the game, but I was losing most of the game. Okay, knight d7, that's my move. h4, put it in h. Bishop b7, this is my idea. And then after queen g3, I play king f8. So white has a nice attack against black's king because black's king's on f8 and the rook's on h8. But I have this very solid center. I have a nice center. Okay, he played king b1. Always play king b1. Bishop f6. Maybe I'll take his knight. Oh, give me the knight. Two knight. Bishop c7 attacking my queen. Now, I didn't play queen e7, losing my queen. No! Then the title of the lecture would be How to Blunder Your Queen Botez Style. Then I get sued by Botez. Okay, I played queen e8. That's a better move. f4. Here comes the shack attack. King to g8. Try to play king h7 and get my rook out. Bishop d6. Played a5. Then I can play bishop a6 and trade off my silly bishop on b7. Rook f1. Then I took on c3. Takes with a queen. And then I play knight f6. So I give up the two bishops, but knight takes e4 is a huge threat. He took on d5, which I play knight e4. And then I take on d5. See, what would I have done on queen b3? Oh, I play knight takes bishop. I was like, this threatens my bishop, and he's a pawn ahead, but I forgot I could just take this. Probably still that's okay for white. Okay, he played queen a3 and I took. Now I have a nice knight on e4 and I haven't gotten checkmated yet. Bishop d3. Bishop a6. That way if he takes my knight, I can take his rook. I want to keep my knight on e4. Then I transfer my knight to f5. Now I play the key positional move, h5. h5 is important, and in the first game of the lecture, I said don't move pawns in front of your king, and you were like, okay. Then you forgot that I said that, so now I can play h5, and you can't yell at me. So the idea of h5 is simple. I'm going to play knight f5 very soon. Then I don't want him to play g4. Then my knight h5, knight f5 would look silly. So I play h5 to control the g4 square. Then my knight has f5 permanently. And now I can move my rook, make a rover, Jen Shahadi style. With rook h6, rook, save my pawn, rook g6. Now, if you just move the video to this point and you haven't watched anything previous, you might think that I castled kingside. When actually, I played king f8, king g8, rook h6, rook g6. Okay, strategically, white's losing because all of his pawns are terrible, and my king is now safe because of my knight on f5 and my rook on g6. I ended up winning material. Knight e3, attacking his rook. Now, if he plays rook takes d4, the obvious move, I play rook g2, attacking his queen, and I'm also threatening checkmate. So after knight e3, he sacks the exchange, and the rest of the game is a very simple win. My king is very safe now on g8 with my rook, especially with my rook on g4, protecting my pawn on g7. And I'm up the exchange for nothing, so I was able to win quite easily. And then instead of taking this pawn, I played rook here because I want to take this pawn. And then I'll get some passed pawns on the king side. And now he resigned because he has no counterplay. He can never play b3 or b4 because I take. If he plays b4, I can take with the rook en passant. So those were 3 games where black was getting attacked, but defended successfully against the attack and was able to win the game. Hopefully you learned about great defense. I want to thank our sponsor, Keon, for sponsoring the defensive lecture. If you'd like to sponsor a lecture, you can look in the details of the video, the description, and contact my wife, Karen. We have a different sponsored lecture every week. The topic of the lecture is up to you, unless it's like crazy. Occasionally, like one time out of 10, one time out of 15, the lecture topic doesn't make any sense, and we're like, that doesn't make any sense. But usually, whatever topic you're interested in, as long as it's chess related, we'll do a lecture on the topic of your choice. Thanks again for sponsoring the lecture. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time with more weekly lectures. Defense, defense. And that's for people who saw the movie Falling Down. I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold. Thanks for watching. Bye.